Yeah, and but you and me and many other thinkers, systems thinkers are aware of it. But how can we then form, let's say, a movement or a volumetric movement that we need? Because we are, you and me, we are voices, some from the desert somehow. I always feel, you know, someone shouting in the empty desert somewhere in Mexico or in in the Sahara. So how can we then combine our knowledge? There's many thinkers like us to make an impression, to exploit or explore education, for example. Have you any ideas on that?
Well, you see, education to me is exactly what the same thing as planning. A planning in a company is solving the problems, solving new problems, acquiring capacities that you don't have. And that is exactly what education is to an individual, the person, okay? You go to school as a child to learn to do things, to learn, okay? Things that you don't know how to do, you're gonna learn. And you're among them how to think, how to read, how to write, how to explain, those sort of things. And then you incorporate that knowledge into your personal inventory, let's say. So education and planning are linked. Education is the name you get at the lowest level, and planning is what you get at the corporate level, okay? But it's exactly the same thing. You're trying to create new capabilities, okay? Now, this is the way Russell Acuff, who was somebody I knew personally, and a very dear friend of Stafford, you know, Russell, that's the guy, exactly. Russell and Stafford were good friends. And I have to tell you this short story from Stafford's point of view.
Yeah.
Stafford said that he was always in a quarrel with Acuff because Stafford said that complexity was complex and you had to teach cybernetics and it required a new language and there was no way out of it unless you learned how to think in terms of complexity. And Russ Acuff was more pragmatic.
Yeah.
He said, no, Stafford, people don't want to learn to think. They want recipes. And it's our job to give them recipes, okay?
That's it, yeah.
And this was an ongoing conversation for ages between two of them, okay?
Right.
So here I am, I know both of them, I talked to both of them, and who am I going to side with? Well, because Stafford was much more closer to me, I tend to with Stafford. But on the other hand, what about Acuff's argument, okay? So I am sort of in between, okay? If you can solve it practically, do it. If you need a deeper understanding, go to Stafford's language and models and way of thinking, okay?
Yeah,
Stafford,
exactly.
I knew him, I saw him in action. I saw him relate with some of the other geniuses in the systems community. And Stafford was the weird guy among the weird guys, okay? He was the genius inside the geniuses. And if you look at the VSM, he is taking ideas from Acuff, from Maturana, from Von Forster, and most of all from Ashby, okay?
Yeah.
So he puts all those things together about the observer, the meta system, the control variety, and all that into his viable system model.
Yeah.
Which actually I have been comparing recently with a natural law. It's a cybernetic law. The viable system is a cybernetic law. Of course, it's a model. You can say, no, a model is never a law because a law will sort of stand forever. Well, they don't. They don't stand forever. Models also don't stand forever. But until you give me a better model than Stafford's, okay, I'll go with the viable system.
Yeah.
And then look how I relate that to law, to my profession, that I don't practice that much. But it gives a very strong argument to natural law, okay? An order that is previous to the artificial order created by humans, okay? So I produced a video talking about this, and I added this other argument to the arguments made by a very famous judge, Andrew Napolitano, in the United States.
Yes.
Very popular because he appeared in Fox News.
I've heard of him, yeah.
Until quite recently. And he makes a big argument in favor of the US Constitution following natural law, okay? And a contrast with the positivist, the current of a positivist current of attorneys, lawyers, and judges and jurists that say that there is no natural law, that every law is the product of human beings, and that, you know, once you get a consensus, that's it, and you have to follow it blindly, okay? And then there's this other, so then if you put the cybernetic Bible system model in the equation of what is natural law and how it works, you say, well, we still have a long way to go in shaping our institutions so that we incorporate the Bible system model. And once you do that, many of the paradoxes and things that were unsolvable through logic in law appear to dissolve or appear easy to solve if you use the Bible system model. And the proof of it is that the nation state is organized mostly like a Bible system.
I think so too, because I can see around here, for example, in Switzerland, you know, the villages, I live in a small town, so there's a lot of villages that are autonomous. They used to be autonomous. And this was the way Europe was built. Nation states were built by autonomous areas that could supply for themselves, that could, you know, cater to themselves.
Yes.
And I think that's a natural law that has been naturally developed without any regulation. It just happened to be like that because people needed to survive.
Maybe Switzerland is better at managing the higher recursion levels. Okay, how you handle that, and they are more effective, you know.
I think so too.
Friends tell me that Switzerland abuses the voting mechanism, and everybody gets to opine on everything that's going on.
Yes,
but it works, and everybody, you know, nobody can say they weren't forewarned or anything. You know, everybody knows everything of what's going on if you want to.
If you want to, there is information and you can participate. Yes, exactly. And that, I think, is a good way to run a nation state that, of course, consists of all kinds of cantons, you know, like provinces that have to communicate and cooperate together to create this whole goal of survival, really, for a country. And I think when we look at survival and the goals that we need to have as human beings and nature, we have the natural laws, as you can see, as you just said, to guide us, and we can copy nature to copy into our own systems how to survive, how nature survives by the you know, by cognition, by communication, by information, by feedback.
My friends in Switzerland, the Maliks, Fredman and Constantine, both good friends of mine, father and son, try to do just that in the consultancy that they have, which I would say is not much a consultancy. It's more like an intervention, because they organize this teams integrity super integrations, and you know, in 3 or 4 days they can get to the root of the evils of a certain company, a very large company.
Yeah.
As far as I know, they are working on the restructuring of Volkswagen, which is enormous.
Yeah.
Good for them. And they try to emulate, you know, natural mechanisms, natural control structures to guide them, you know, what the Stafford suggested. They are followers of Stafford. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I also do in my job too. Yeah. When I do, for example, risk assessments for oil companies, I apply the same natural laws and the law of requisite variety, of course. So if there's enough, I can see if there is enough variety in the system to absorb risks. And I think it's
how does
very
that
useful.
work? Do you have to sort of reveal your secrets? Because the Malik sort of gave up on trying to explain everything to their clients. They said, "Look, listen, the clients want the solutions; they don't want the explanations."
That is what I find too, because when I go in too much theory, they maybe are reluctant. But again, I'm learning myself how to stay simple, to stay focused on simplicity rather than overwhelm them with the theories we just talked about. That is impossible, I find, in a pragmatic, practical, and go-getter world.
Well, one conclusion we can tell whoever is listening is that hierarchies, pyramid-like structures, do not think.
No.
They don't think. Only a network thinks.
Yeah.
So the same people you have hired and they're working as part of the hierarchy, you have to get them together and have them work in a very different environment so you can get a network that is a thinking network. And that is what the Malik doing with the invention of Stafford of Teams Integrity. Okay.
Yeah,
but there are other methods that can create that thinking network that doesn't have to be the Teams Integrity. There are other methods. Okay.
Yeah, well, yeah, exactly. And that is what I advise my clients to. And reluctantly, they start asking questions. And there is this, of course, management system that are created by, for example, oil companies, International Marine Forum. They have this forum, they set the standards, they create the guidelines, but they are very mechanistic, So the input of pragmatism, the input of cybernetics becomes crucial to make them work. That's what I find.
Yeah, I can see why, because it all has to do with the complexity.
Yeah.
People have to understand that the word complex is not used superficially. Complex means exactly one thing, that you cannot describe the whole system and all its interactions. You cannot, even if you spent the whole life of the universe, okay? The combinations, permutations are so great that you have to deal with models of the system.
Yeah.
Now, people also perhaps have not realized that most of science today is not Newtonian science. It's not the traditional science. It's not like the experimenter. No, it's people working with computers, creating models of proteins, of a virus or whatever. And as soon as you introduce a model into a scientific equation, it becomes a cybernetic model and it becomes cybernetic knowledge. Mm-hmm. It's not traditional Newtonian, okay?
No.
It's not science in the von Forster used to say that science had the prefix of psi, which means cutting, like cutting into pieces. Other people disagree with that, but he said that was the origin of science.
Yeah, to make
cutting into pieces. Small cybernetics is about putting things together and starting looking at the whole. And you cannot do that with a complex system unless you create a model where the feedback loops, both positive and negative, can give you an explanation of how the system works.
Yeah, exactly. And as you say, I had this concept made that we are talking about reality, right? We are talking about reality, and that the issue was that I was trying to find the paradigm. What is reality? What is reality? Can we decide it as an empirical reality, or should we also include intuition, imagination? What do you think?
I think that the same answer that Stafford versus Acuff, you have to combine whatever works. Okay, being a cybernetician is not close to do the empirical. but you cannot close yourself to the intuition.
Yeah, exactly.
There's a very famous book of cybernetics called Psycho-Cybernetics. Okay, I don't know if you ever heard about it. Exactly, Maxwell.
Yeah, I have not read it totally. I started it, but I still haven't read it.
That book has sold more than 30-something million copies.
Yes, I have a copy myself. Yeah.
And when it came out, it made a big splash because cybernetics were really new. And this guy comes out and says, "Hey, your image, your self-image, is doing a lot of good or a lot of damage to you. I've been operating people with for aesthetic purposes, and if they don't change their self-image, they don't change at all." Now, I've seen many, at the time, criticisms of Maltz saying, "That is not cybernetics. You are an usurper," okay?
Yeah.
Well, it turned out that he was more correct than the early cyberneticians, because this was not obviously a mechanical world he was talking about. He was talking about models. And this answers your question. We have models in our heads of what we are, how we work, what we do. These are memes or rules, okay? They are not physical, okay? They are information inside our brain,
yeah,
and they govern us, okay? So what Stafford discovered, and I learned from Stafford, is that a model, even though it has no physical existence, okay, it will command, okay, a rocket. A model will command a rocket and take you to the moon. Yeah. And it doesn't exist. It's non-physical entity. It's just instructions. It's just information.
Yeah.
It's okay. So it turned out that Maxwell Maltz was right all along. It is part of cybernetics. Okay. Of course, if you look for the cybernetics in Maltz's book, is very little, very basic and very elementary. Okay. But the millions of people that bought the book knew that it worked, okay, and it sold more copies than Wiener's book. Okay?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
it's one of the best sellers of all times.
Yes, I know, I saw it, and I still have the plan to read it. And now we talked about it, I will read it soon. So, but I was just sort of jumping from the, let's say, the models into the perception. You know, the perception. So
well, the perception acts because we already have, to complete your question, we already have these models in our minds, okay?
Yeah.
And what we perceived goes into our brain through the models that we already have about the world.
Exactly.
Because we are identifying patterns, okay?
Correct.
So we learn patterns, and then we recognize patterns, and as I talk to you, okay, your image here on my computer screen, in my mind, in the back of my head, I have that image, okay? I'm seeing with my brain, not with my eyes. Exactly. I'm building an image back there. And then, as I continue talking, the image that I already have saves the brain a lot of computation power, because I'm just noticing the movements of your head or your eyes or mouth or hands or whatever, as in a contrast to the image that I had like half a second ago. Okay, it's like going to the movies. You're getting a succession of pictures, and your mind doesn't see the succession of pictures. It sees the movement, sees the difference. Okay. So when you talk about the intuition, the let's say contribution of cybernetics is, listen, the experimenter in cybernetics is part of the experiment, because we okay, humans as observers are choosing, literally choosing the system that we want to see, okay? Ashby gives a very good example in his book. He says, here's a pendulum, a physical pendulum, but this is not only a pendulum. You can, it has weight, it has electrical conductivity, it has a heat capacity or whatever. So what is the pendulum you try to describe? It's the observer that says, I'm going to use this thing and I'm going to say something significant about this system. Well, if he is an electrician, he said, I can use this to connect two cables that are too far to come together, you know, and I could use this as a part of the cable. Or you can do the oscillation thing and say, no, we want to use this to produce a clock. Or you can use some other stuff. So that, to me, it was a great discovery, because coming from law, we always were looking for the big eternal truth, the answer to all the questions and everything. And that's actually, it's not possible, because we as observers choose the system we want to study. And you can look at the same, I always tell my wife, you and I go to the movies and you see one movie and I see another one, you know?
Yes, yes, the observer effect, as it is called, right, is of course that we are part of the quantum world ourselves. So we cannot, let's say, step back and look at it objectively. We are subjects as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So to produce knowledge, we have to take in consideration both the traditional way, okay, and you can solve it through a traditional cause and effect. That's very good. But you must always be aware that there's an alternative, which is the cybernetic way, okay, the circular causality. And dealing with complex systems, you have to use the cybernetic way, okay? My hero right now, explaining all of this, is Dave Snowden and his Cynefin framework. He has been lecturing people all over the world.
Yes, I've seen him, yeah.
Window of possibilities, where he says, bottom left, you have chaos. Bottom right, you have simple systems. On top of those, you have complicated systems like Six Sigma, like the balanced scorecard for business, all those solutions that are highly detailed solutions, okay? They give you recipes like Acuff.
Like I said, yeah.
And then to the left, on top of the chaos, you have the complex, okay?
Yeah.
And the Santa Fe Institute in New Mexico started studying complex adaptive systems, okay, which have their own definition, very different from viable systems. I think viable systems are a subspecies of complex adaptive systems. But in the end, they have a very different way of approach to them. So then these guys started with the Santa Fe Institute because they wanted a solution to the traditional approach to economics that was making some banks go bankrupt, because they would lend money under certain cause and effect premises, solutions, and they didn't work. So they went to John Reed from Citibank, and they got $100 million to start the Santa Fe Institute to explore new ways of doing economics. And then they came up with artificial life, artificial complex adaptive systems, and all of that. Okay.
Yeah, so it's interesting. So if I can speak to you for days, I know. So, but as already we passed an hour without any problem. So I thought I'd give you a last conclusion for the people who are going to hopefully watching this one day. So you said, just last sentence, you said cybernetic solutions are available and they are viable, aren't they?
Yes, of course. I think that eventually the whole world, I was thinking about this last night because of another talk that I have tomorrow. Eventually, we are all going to cybernetics, eventually.
Yeah, yeah, I
Because
agree.
people, when they really find out that socialism doesn't work, they're going to have to go back to capitalism. How do we improve capitalism? Okay? How do
Yes,
we make it work for everybody? And there's only one answer. To make capitalism work for everybody, you have to share information with everybody. Simple as that,
I
with
agree.
everybody.
I agree.
No more secrets. And in order to have corporations that have no secrets, that have to share, you can do that. And there are levels where you can keep information and levels where you can share. And then levels where you keep and levels where you share. It's all in the recursions, okay? How you handle the recursions.
Yeah,
And people are want to, as a politician, I'm talking to you. People want honesty, and you cannot get honesty without sharing information, and you cannot get sharing information without total transparency, and you cannot get transparency unless information flows freely, and it won't flow freely if you don't have a structure like the viable system, universal management, or something that else that comes out that has the structure to share without an overload of the channels, okay?
yeah,
Without overloading and without gaps. The universal management is about finding the gaps in the information flows and finding the bottlenecks in the information flows.
yeah,
And then you can go in and design the amplifiers, and the filters.
yeah,
And you know very well that it is a balance, okay? How much do we have to invest to get this, and how much not, how much, and that sort of questions.
yeah, exactly.
So I think that eventually the capitalist system, you're going to have informed buyers, okay? I would expect the world to become more sophisticated, and that we could use cybernetics as an everyday language. And this is one of the reasons I just refuse the petitions of some of my friends and possible future partners that we keep the cybernetics hidden and they would just give the solutions. I want to change the culture, okay? I want to change the world, okay?
So, well,
And you
then
cannot change the
I
world
can
by
shake it.
hiding the really important stuff, okay?
I can shake your hands on that because I think the same thing, and I try, and I'm really am busy to, and I understand now by physics, the law of physics, that if you do not share all information, chaos is the direct result, entropy. And I think
Yes.
that is an understandable law of physics that we should, promote more to understand that people, if they really try to escape
Well,
reality by
just
lying, that something happens that they cannot
yeah,
control any longer.
but here is something that I want to share also.
Yeah,
I went to the Santa Fe Institute I've been there, I think 3 times, but the first time I went there, I had the privilege of meeting Chris Langton, one of the creators of the artificial life thing. And I was very worried about Mexico, and I explained to him that I saw something really bad coming. Well, 2 days later came the devaluation of 1994, which was terrific for Mexico. We wiped away the 20% of the internal gross national product or whatever.
mm-hmm.
But he told me when I said information, and he said, yes, you need information, but it's not about sharing everything to everybody. He was meaning that you need structures, okay? It's not like you have to know everything that's going on in the world.
No.
It just doesn't happen. Now, in our legal system, our law in Mexico, following the Napoleonic Code, assumes that you know all the law, and if you break it, it's because you were acting in bad faith. It was your obligation to know the law, okay?
Yeah.
So here is this assumption that we know is not possible. So then again, this is an argument that we want transparency, but this sharing of information has to be done through the proper channels so that people that want to be informed can be informed. But if you're expert in energy, maybe you don't want to deal with expert in making clothes, you know, or some other thing. And
No,
you're not
I think maybe we should just say, okay, we have the information and we need information. When we have a purpose, we need information to get that goal, isn't it? That's the cybernetic way.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So then we can use relevant, I call it relevant information to achieving a goal, you know, maximum volume of irrelevant information which is needed to achieve a goal. For example, of a, you know, a balanced government or a, you know, corona crisis answer for example.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You know, the coronavirus is I've seen it as an information game, you know, of missing information.
Exactly.
I don't know why the world hasn't celebrated the fact that we're going to get a test that will tell you 15 minutes if you have the virus or not. I don't know. It's absolutely irrelevant because right now, if you have it, you can go on spreading the virus 15 days before you know you have it. And this delay in the system, okay, is a killer. That kills you, kills a lot of people. The Ebola, which is many, many times more mortal than the coronavirus, didn't kill as many people simply because it evolved so suddenly that the person dies in a day or a couple of days, so you know where it is and you can control it, you can isolate that person, okay? Before you start being a source of contamination or an infection. But this thing takes 14 days. That delay is really makes it really mortal. So if you have a 15-minute test, I think that the virus is gonna be defeated through the testing of a very inexpensive 15-minute test worth $5.
Yeah, well, I hope that this corona crisis, which now is being guided by interests, not by information, you know, by public or governmental interests or corporate interests, and that I think is really, really harming the stability of social cohesion. And that is, I think, a good way to conclude our conversation today. If you have anything to add, please go. And then.
Well, we just tell our viewers, if anybody's watching, that we were going to talk a little about the nature of information and quantum bits and all that. We will leave that for another time. Okay.
Yes. So the next time because there's so much to talk about, but the physical and natural and the cognitions input we can do in a later time. This was just an open conversation. Great to meet you. Great to talk to you all the way overseas over the Atlantic.
I appreciate very much that you have watched my stuff.
Yes.
I hope everybody would do that. More people would do that.
Well, I'm sharing this with my network
right now. The thing that maybe I'm too politicized and people don't want my conclusions, but anyway, thank you very much. It's been a real pleasure, and I hope to see you again.
Yes. Well, we can do this anytime you like. If you have any news, we can share it like this to enlarge the.
Well, you tell me when we continue with the other half of our initial intention.
Yeah.
Okay. And I'll be glad to hear about what you have to say about the bits and qubits.
Okay. All right. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Goodbye.
Mucho gusto. Gracias.
Igualmente. Bye. Adiós. Hasta luego. Pronto. Hasta pronto. Hasta pronto.
Hasta pronto. Sí, espero.